Jack sat in his small apartment, staring out of the window. It had been years since he'd last seen Hurlira, the alien woman he'd rescued. He'd been a soldier back then, stationed on a distant planet. He remembered the mission like it was yesterday. They had found her locked away, held captive by an unknown enemy. Her people had been destroyed, and she had been the last of her kind. The mission had been dangerous, but when Jack saw her for the first time, something inside him shifted. He couldn't leave her behind. He had risked everything to free her. Since then, Jack hadn't heard from her. He thought about her often. What had happened to her? Was she okay? Was she safe? Now, years later, Jack lived a quiet life. No more missions, no more battles. He had left it all behind. His days were filled with routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. But that peaceful life was about to change in the most unexpected way. One evening, as Jack was sitting at his desk, a knock echoed from the door. First he ignored it, assuming it was just the wind or maybe one of his neighbors. But then the knock came again, louder this time. Someone was at his door. Jack stood up, feeling a slight unease. He wasn't expecting anyone. His friends were few, and his family was far away. Who could it be? With a deep breath, Jack walked over to the door and opened it. Standing in the doorway was a figure he never expected to see again. It was Lyra. Her appearance had changed. She was taller now, more confident, her presence stronger than before. Her skin, which had once looked pale and fragile, now radiated with a healthy glow. Her eyes, which had once seemed fearful and lost, were filled with purpose and wisdom. "Jack," she said softly, her voice still carrying that otherworldly tone that Jack remembered. "I've come back." Jack blinked, trying to process what was happening. For a moment, he stood there, speechless. His heart raced in his chest. He hadn't expected this. "Lyra," he managed to say, his voice full of disbelief. "What? What are you doing here?" "How I've come with something." "Important," she interrupted, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Jack was too stunned to stop her. Once inside, Lyra paused, looking around the apartment with interest, her gaze lingering on the simple furnishings. "It's been years, hasn't it?" she said, her eyes softening. "I've learned so much since I left." Jack closed the door behind her, still trying to understand what was going on. "What's going on, Lyra? Are you here?" I know, Jack," she said, her voice filled with regret. "I know I disappeared, but I had to go. I had to find my people. I couldn't stay." Jack nodded slowly, remembering how devastated she had been when they parted. Ways she had promised to return once she was safe, but he never imagined she would come back like this. "What is it?" Jack asked, trying to focus. "What's so important?" Lyra took a deep breath, and for a moment, Jack thought he saw fear in her eyes. "I've brought something back with me," she said quietly. "Something that could change everything." Jack raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to make of her words. "What are you talking about?" Lyra reached into the folds of her cloak and pulled out a small, glowing object. It was unlike anything Jack had ever seen before. It was a simple crystal, yet there was something about it that felt powerful. The crystal glowed softly, pulsing with energy. It seemed to hum in the air, vibrating with a strange force. "This," Lyra said, holding the crystal in front of Jack, "is a key to something much bigger than both of us." Jack took a step back, instinctively cautious. "A key to what?" "The universe," she replied, her voice filled with conviction. "The galaxy is changing, Jack. New powers are rising, and this crystal is the key to everything." Jack looked at her, confused. "I don't understand. What is this?" Lyra's gaze was intense, her eyes locking onto his. "It's an artifact from my people," she explained. "It holds the power to reshape reality itself. Time, space, even the very fabric of the universe, it's all in this crystal. But it's unstable. It's dangerous. Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "Dangerous?" he asked. "Why would you bring it here?" Lyra looked away for a moment, as if unsure of how to explain. "Because it's the only way to stop what's coming." "Stop what?" "The war," she said, her voice growing serious. There are forces in the galaxy that want to control this power, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. Jack felt his heart beat faster. This was all too much. He had left that life behind, the life of danger and conflict. He just wanted peace. But Lyra's presence reminded him that some things couldn't be avoided. I didn't come here just to give you the artifact, Lyra continued. I came because I need your help. You're the only one I trust. The only one who can protect this crystal from falling into the wrong hands. Jack stood silently, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't ignore what she was asking. He had helped her once before, and now she was asking for his help again. The question was, could he really turn his back on all of this? I don't know, Lyra, Jack said quietly, shaking his head. I don't know if I can go back to that life. Lyra's expression softened. I understand, Jack, but I wouldn't ask if it wasn't necessary. For a long moment, they both stood there in silence. The weight of the decision hung in the air, and Jack knew that whatever choice he made, his life would never be the same. Jack sat down at a small kitchen table, still trying to process everything Lyra had just told him. The glowing crystal in front of him seemed to pulse with energy, its soft light flickering as if it had a life of its own. He had no idea what it was, but Lyra's words echoed in his mind. A key to something bigger than both of us. Lyra watched him carefully, her expression serious. She had always been a little distant, guarded in her emotions. But today there was a vulnerability in her eyes. Jack could see that she was carrying a heavy burden. What is it, Lyra? Jack asked, his voice calm, but filled with concern. What does this crystal do, and why is it so important? Lyra's eyes softened as she took a deep breath. It's an artifact, Jack. One that has been passed down for generations in my family. It holds immense power that can reshape reality, time, space, even people's thoughts. It's the key to controlling the very fabric of the universe. Stared at her, unsure of what to say. He had never heard anything like this before. His mind raced as he tried to wrap his head around her words. But why would you bring it here? Jack asked. Why not take it somewhere safe? Why bring it to me? Lyra lowered her gaze to the crystal in her hands. Because I need your help. The artifact is unstable. Its power can't be controlled by just anyone. It needs someone with a strong connection to this world. Someone who understands how to harness its potential. That's where you come in. Jack shook his head, still confused. I don't understand. I'm just a guy. Soldier. Sure. But I've been out of that life for years. I'm not the kind of person who can wield that kind of power. Lyra's eyes locked onto his. You are exactly the person who can help. You freed me, Jack. You've always had the ability to do the impossible. You've already proven that. This isn't just about the artifact. It's about protecting the galaxy from those who want to use it for their own gain. Jack looked away, his mind spinning. He had left the life of fighting and war behind, preferring the quiet, ordinary life he had built for himself. But now here was Lyra, asking him to step back into a world he had tried so hard to forget. And the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. The war, Lyra continued, her voice barely above a whisper. There are others who want this power. They'll do anything to control it. If they get their hands on it, they'll have the ability to destroy entire civilizations with just a thought. It will be the end of everything. Jack's heart sank. He couldn't deny the seriousness of what she was saying. The idea of such power falling into the wrong hands made his blood run cold. He had seen what powerful enemies could do when they were left unchecked. He had been part of that world once, fighting for causes that didn't always make sense. But this was different. He looked at Lyra, her expression filled with determination. What exactly do you need from me? I need you to help me understand the crystal, Lyra said. I don't fully understand it myself. The power it holds is ancient, and it's not meant to be used by one person alone. It needs balance. But I don't have the strength to control it on my own. I've tried, Jack. I've been training, learning as much as I can, but I still don't know how to use it safely. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. What do you want? Me, to learn how to use it? To control this ... thing? Lyra nodded, her gaze unwavering. Yes, Together we can make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Together we can protect the galaxy. Jack stood up, pacing around the small room. He had never wanted to get involved in something like this again. But looking at Lyra, seeing the trust in her eyes, he knew he couldn't turn his back on her. Not again. What happens if we can't control it? Jack asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. What happens if we fail? Lyra was silent for a moment, as if considering the weight of his question. If we fail, everything will be destroyed, she said softly. The crystal's power is beyond anything we can imagine. But it can also heal. It can save the galaxy, Jack. We just have to find a way to unlock its potential without letting it consume us. Jack took a deep breath, his mind still racing. He had always trusted Lyra, even back when he didn't understand her. He knew her heart, and he knew she wasn't someone who would lie to him. She believed in this crystal, and she believed in him. That was enough for him to take the first step. All right, Jack said, his voice firm. I'll help you. But we're going to do this the right way. No more rushing in blind. We'll figure this out together. Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, a small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Thank you, Jack. You don't know how much this means to me. As they sat down together, Jack felt the weight of the responsibility settling on his shoulders. But he also felt a spark of something else, hope. Maybe they could actually stop the coming war. Maybe, just maybe, they could use the crystal to bring balance to the galaxy. But Jack knew one thing for sure. Their journey was just beginning. And the path ahead would be anything but easy. The next few days passed in a blur for Jack. Lyra stayed with him at his apartment, the two of them spending hours studying the crystal. They learned that its power was unpredictable and difficult to control. Each time they tried to unlock its secrets, they only discovered more questions. Despite their efforts, Jack still felt like they were walking a fine line between discovery and disaster. One evening, as they sat at the table, the soft glow of the crystal lighting up the room, a sudden sense of unease filled the air. Feel that something was wrong. His instincts, honed from years of military service, were telling him that trouble was coming. Lyra, too, had sensed it. She looked at him, her face serious. Jack, she said quietly, we need to leave now. Jack's heart raced. What's going on? What's wrong? They've found us, Lyra replied, her voice calm but filled with urgency. The forces I told you about, the ones who want the artifact. They're here. They've tracked us down. Mind raced. He had been prepared for this moment, but he wasn't sure if he was ready. Who are they? What do they want with the crystal? They're led by an alien warlord, Lyra explained. His name is Zarek. He's one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He wants the artifact to control everything. He'll stop at nothing to get it. Jack stood up, his mind already running through plans and escape routes. What do we do? Where do we go? Can't stay here, Lyra said, her tone firm. Zarek's forces are too strong. We need to move fast and get the artifact to a safe place. There's an old hideout I know hidden, away from the galaxy's major powers. We'll be safe there, at least for a while. Without another word, they grabbed what they could and headed for the door. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he led the way down the hallway. The apartment complex was quiet, eerily so, as if the building itself was holding its breath as they stepped into the alleyway outside. Jack noticed the shadows lengthening in the dim light. He knew something wasn't right. They had only taken a few steps when the unmistakable sound of engines filled the air. Jack's pulse quickened. He turned to Lyra. Get down, he shouted, grabbing her and pulling her to the ground as blaster fire shot past them, narrowly missing. Jack's military training kicked in as he rolled, taking cover behind a nearby dumpster. Lyra's eyes were wide with fear, but she quickly regained her composure and pulled out a small device from her belt. I knew they'd find us, she said, quickly tapping the device. I've triggered a cloaking signal. It will hide us from their scanners for a short time, but we need to move quickly. They didn't need to be told twice. Jack helped Lyra to her feet, and they ran zigzagging through the streets to avoid any more blaster fire. The city was dark, the streets empty, as if everyone else had already gotten out of the way. As they reached a narrow street, Jack glanced over his shoulder and saw the first of Zarek's soldiers emerge from the shadows. They were massive, heavily armored creatures, their red eyes glowing in the dark. Jack's breath caught in his throat. There were at least 20 of them. They're right behind us, he said through gritted teeth. We won't outrun them. Lyra nodded. We don't have to outrun them. We just need to lose them long enough to reach the hideout. The cloaking device flickered once again, hiding them from view. Jack's mind raced. He knew they couldn't keep this up forever. Zarek's soldiers would be relentless. But he also knew that Lyra was right. Their only hope now was to make it to the hideout. If they could reach it, they might stand a chance. The chase lasted for what seemed like hours. They darted through alleyways, down side streets, and into the shadows of abandoned buildings. Jack was sure they had lost the soldiers a few times, only for the faint hum of their cloaking devices to remind them they were still being tracked, finally. They reached the outskirts of the city, where the buildings started to thin out, and the land opened up into vast fields. The hideout was close. Jack could see it in the distance, a small, nondescript building hidden among the rocks and trees. But as they approached, Jack's heart sank. The hideout was surrounded. Zarek's soldiers had anticipated their escape. We're trapped, Jack said, his voice tight with frustration. Lyra's expression was hard, her eyes steely with determination. We have one chance. The artifact is our only hope now. Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the decision before him. What do we do? Lyra didn't hesitate. She reached for the crystal. I'll use the artifact. It's the only way to fight back. No, Jack shouted, grabbing her arm. You don't know what it could do. It's too dangerous. Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. Jack, this is our only chance. The crystal was meant for this moment. If we don't stop them now, they'll destroy everything we know. Jack hesitated, then nodded. Okay, do it. Lyra closed her eyes and held the crystal tightly in her hands. The air around them began to hum with energy, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to tremble. Jack's heart raced as the power of the artifact surged, its glow intensifying. The soldiers around them began to move, but before they could take another step, the ground split open, sending a shockwave through the area. The soldiers stumbled back, their eyes wide with fear. Lyra's voice was steady as she spoke. We're not going down without a fight. The battle for their survival had begun. The energy from the crystal surged through the air, crackling with power. Jack's heart raced as he looked around at the soldiers, who were now stumbling backward, trying to regain their footing. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the air hummed with an electric charge. Lyra stood firm, her eyes closed, her hands tightly gripping the glowing crystal. Jack had never seen her like this before, focused, calm, yet filled with an intensity that made him feel both fear and awe. He had always known she was capable, but now it was clear the power she wielded could reshape everything. And he wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The soldiers quickly recovered, but they hesitated, unsure of what was happening. Their once confident movements had slowed, and they began to look around, scanning for any signs of danger. Lyra, Jack said urgently, taking a step closer to her. You have to stop. This power, it's too much. You don't know what it can do. Lyra opened her eyes, and for a moment Jack could see the conflict within them. She looked at him, a trace of doubt in her expression. But then she tightened her grip on the crystal. I have to do this, she said softly. If I don't, Zarek's army will crush us. This is the only way to protect what's left. Jack watched as Lyra lifted the crystal higher. The ground beneath them cracked open, sending debris flying in all directions. The soldiers, now clearly intimidated, took a few cautious steps back, their weapons drawn but hesitant. But Jack couldn't ignore the feeling in his gut. There was something off about the power Lyra was using. Something that didn't sit right with him. Lyra, he called out again, his voice desperate. Listen to me. You don't know the full story, do you? About the artifact, ... About what it really is. Lyra's eyes widened in confusion. She lowered the crystal slightly, her expression shifting from determination to concern. What do you mean? Jack swallowed hard. He had to say it, even if it made him feel uneasy. I know you've told me it's from your people, but there's more to it, isn't there? You've only seen part of the truth. It's artifact. This power, it's not just a tool for protection. It was created for something much darker. Lyra's face went pale and she stepped back as if the ground beneath her was shifting. What are you saying, Jack? She whispered. What do you mean darker? Jack took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on him. When I freed you, I didn't know everything about this crystal, but I've been doing some research, and I found something. The artifact isn't just a power source, it's a weapon. A weapon designed to control not just worlds, but minds. It can twist the fabric of reality to shape a person's thoughts and actions. Lyra's eyes widened, and she lowered the crystal completely, as if the truth had hit her like a punch. She took a step back, her mind racing to process what Jack had just said. No. No. That's not possible. The crystal was always meant to help. To heal. I don't think it was, Jack replied, his voice tight. It was created by a civilization that used it to control entire galaxies. It was meant for conquest. Zarek and others like him. They want to use it to remake the universe in their image. Lyra looked down at the crystal, her hands shaking. I had no idea, she whispered. I thought it could bring balance. I thought I could restore my people. But if what you're saying is true, you can't use it like this, Jack interrupted. You have to destroy it. If you don't, it will corrupt you. It'll corrupt everything. We're dealing with something far more dangerous than we realized. The weight of Jack's words hung in the air. Lyra felt a sense of dread rising inside her. She had spent years searching for a way to restore her people. She had believed in the crystal, in its potential for good. But now, with the truth in front of her, she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. I don't know what to do, Lyra, said, her voice trembling. I thought this power could save us. But now, Lyra, Jack said, taking a step forward, his voice gentle but firm, we need to make a choice. Do we use it to fight Zarek, knowing what it can do? Or do we find another way? Because if we don't destroy it, we could lose everything we're fighting for. Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with pain and confusion. She had always believed that the crystal could be used for good, but now she wasn't so sure. Weight of responsibility was heavy on her shoulders, and the fear of making the wrong choice was suffocating. I can't destroy it, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. I can't let everything I've fought for go to waste. My people. ... They need this. Jack reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. I know you want to save them. But at what cost, Lyra? You've already seen what this power can do. We can't let it control us. You have to stop Zarek without using it. For a long moment they stood in silence, the crackling energy from the crystals still filling the air. The soldiers around them had backed off, sensing the growing tension. They were waiting for an opportunity. But Jack knew that the real fight wasn't just against Zarek, it was against the power they were both struggling to control. Finally, Lyra lowered her head, her shoulders slumping in defeat. You're right. Jack, she said quietly, we can't use it. Not like this. Jack sighed in relief, but the battle was far from over. They still had to find a way to stop Zarek, and the odds were stacked against them. But for the first time since Lyra's return, Jack felt a spark of hope. They had one chance, and they would face it together. This part deepens the story by revealing the truth about the artifact, adding moral and emotional depth to the characters. It also sets up the next part of the journey where they must confront their enemies without relying on the dangerous power of the crystal. Would you like to continue with the next part? The quiet tension between Jack and Lyra hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. The decision had been made. The artifact couldn't be used. It was too dangerous, and neither of them could afford to let it control their fate. They faced had only grown stronger, and there was no turning back now. Zarek's army was getting closer, and they had to move. Jack looked at Lyra, who was still holding the crystal in her hands, though her grip was less tight now. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with uncertainty. It was clear that the weight of their decision was pressing on her, but she had made up her mind. We need to get to the safe house, Lyra said quietly, breaking the silence. There's still time. But we have to hurry. Jack nodded, trying to push aside the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in his chest. They had no choice. The safe house was the only place where they might stand a chance against Zarek and his soldiers. If they could make it there, they could regroup, figure out a plan. But Jack knew that the odds of success were slim. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and the artifact was the last thing they needed to deal with. They started moving again. Their footsteps quick but careful. The city was still eerily quiet. The sounds of the battle that had erupted only minutes ago, now distant and muffled. Jack could feel the weight of each step, urgency of their situation pushing him forward. As they neared the outskirts of the city, the first of Zarek's soldiers appeared on the horizon, their silhouettes dark against the setting sun. They were marching in formation, their weapons gleaming in the fading light. It was clear they weren't here to negotiate. They're already here, Jack muttered, his heart rate quickening. We don't have much time. Lyra glanced over her shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she studied the advancing soldiers. We won't outrun them. We can outsmart them. Follow my lead. Jack nodded, trusting her instinct. They veered off the main path, taking a series of back alleys and hidden roads that Lyra knew well. The farther they went from the city center, the more the terrain became rough and wild. They were now in the wilderness, far from any civilization. But Zarek's soldiers were still close behind. Jack could hear their boots crunching through the underbrush, their voices low but determined. They were closing in. We need to create a diversion, Jack said, his voice sharp. Something to slow them down. Lyra nodded. She reached into her pack and pulled out a small device, something that looked like a grenade, but much smaller. She pressed a button, and a faint hum filled the air as the device activated. Run, she shouted, tossing the device behind them. The explosion that followed wasn't loud, but it was enough to shake the ground beneath their feet. A burst of bright light and smoke erupted from the device, blinding the soldiers for a moment. Jack didn't waste a second. He grabbed Lyra's hand and they ran faster. Deeper into the wilderness, the soldiers' voices grew louder, but the explosion had bought them some time. For now they were safe. They finally reached the safe house, a small, hidden building nestled in a thick forest. It was old, with weathered walls and overgrown plants surrounding it, but it was secure. Jack had no idea how Lyra knew about it, but he didn't question it. They were here, and that was all that mattered. They quickly moved. Inside, locking the door behind them, the building was empty, except for a few basic supplies: a bed, a table, and a set of old weapons. Jack immediately went to the window, peering out through the cracked glass. He could see the soldiers searching the area, still unaware of their location. They'll find us eventually, Jack said, his voice tense. We don't have much time. Lyra joined him by the window, her eyes scanning the area. I know, but for now, we have to make our stand. We can't keep running forever. Jack turned to face her. What's the plan? I hesitated for a moment before answering. We fight. Use the terrain to our advantage, and we use the crystal. Jack's heart sank. I thought we agreed the crystal was too dangerous. It is, Lyra said, her voice steady. But I can use it. Without letting it control me, I've learned enough to keep it contained. If we don't use it now, we'll be overwhelmed. Zarek's army is too strong. This is our only shot. Jack looked at her, torn. He didn't want to trust the artifact, but he knew Lyra wasn't one to make decisions lightly. She had a plan, and if she thought this was the only way, then he would follow her lead. All right, Jack said, his voice firm. Let's do it. Lyra reached for the crystal, holding it in both hands. The moment she touched it, the air in the room seemed to hum with energy. Jack could feel it, a force unlike anything he had ever experienced before. Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating as the crystal began to glow brighter. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ground trembled. A loud cracking sound echoed through the walls. The door to the safe house suddenly burst open, and Zarek's soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. Without warning, Lyra raised the crystal, and a wave of energy shot out, from it knocking the soldiers off their feet. Jack watched in awe as the energy swirled around the room, pushing the invaders back. But it wasn't enough. More soldiers poured in, overwhelming them. Lyra's power was strong, but it wasn't limitless, Jack. Lyra cried, her voice strained. Help me. Jack grabbed the nearest weapon from the table and rushed into the fray. He fought fiercely, using the environment to his advantage. The soldiers were strong, but Jack was faster, moved with precision, taking them down one by one. But even as he fought, he knew the battle was far from over. They had won this round. But Zarek's army was vast. They wouldn't stop until they had the artifact. This part intensifies the conflict, as Jack and Lyra face Zarek's army head-on. It also showcases their decision to use the artifact, despite the risks involved. Would you like to continue with the next part? The fight in the safe house was over, but the danger wasn't gone. Jack and Lyra stood amidst the wreckage, catching their breath, their bodies aching from the battle. The soldiers that had stormed in were either unconscious or fleeing. Their weapons scattered across the floor. Lyra dropped to her knees, exhausted, still holding the crystal in her hand. Her breathing was heavy, but her focus was unwavering. Jack stood nearby, scanning the area for any sign of more soldiers. He knew this brief victory wouldn't last long. Zarek's forces were relentless, and if they didn't act soon, they would be overwhelmed, Lyra, Jack said, his voice low but filled with urgency. We can't stay here. We need to leave. Lyra nodded, slowly rising to her feet. I know, but we have to be careful. If I keep using the crystal like this, it could drain me. The power... It's too much for one person. Jack glanced at the crystal in her hand. The soft glow was still visible, though faint. He could feel the energy radiating from it, a force that could destroy or protect, depending on how it was used. I'm not sure we have time to be careful, Jack said, running a hand through his hair. Zarek will come for us, and he won't stop until he gets that crystal. We need to get... Ahead of him, Lyra's eyes were filled with determination. I know a place. It's far from here, deep in the mountains. There's a hidden base where we can regroup and figure out how to stop Zarek. We'll be safe there. Jack nodded. He didn't know how much longer they could keep running, but for now, this was the best option. Then let's go. They left the safe house quickly, sticking to the shadows, avoiding any more patrols. Jack stayed alert, his instincts telling him that danger was never far behind. Lyra was by his side, moving with a quiet grace. The crystal still glowing faintly in her hands. The journey through the wilderness was long and treacherous. But they pushed on, determined to reach the hidden base. The closer they got to the mountains, the more Jack felt the weight of the situation. It had come so far, but there was still so much to do. They had to stop Zarek, but they also had to learn how to control the artifact. Without that control, everything they fought for would be lost. As they reached the base, hidden deep within a mountain pass, Jack felt a sense of relief. The base was well hidden, shielded by the rocky terrain and a series of natural barriers. It was an ancient structure, built long before Zarek's rise to power, and it had stood the test of time. This was their last chance. Inside, the air was cool and dry, and the walls were lined with old technology, some of it beyond anything Jack had ever seen. Lyra led him through the corridors, her steps purposeful. She seemed at home here, moving with ease, as though she had been here many times before. This place, Jack said, his voice filled with awe. It feels like it's been untouched for years. It has, Lyra replied. My people built it as a refuge, a place to hide when the war began. It's been abandoned for centuries, but it's still functional. We'll be safe here. For now. They reached a central chamber, where Lyra began to set up a series of monitors and control panels. Jack helped her, though he didn't fully understand the technology. He was more familiar with weapons and tactics than advanced alien tech. But he did his best to follow her instructions. We need to find out where Zarek is, Lyra said as she worked. If we can locate his base, we can plan our next move. But we also need to know more about the artifact. If we don't understand it, we won't be able to stop him. Jack watched her for a moment, his thoughts racing. You said before that the artifact could bend reality, but you've only scratched the surface, haven't you? We don't know its true potential. Lyra paused, glancing at the crystal in her hand. No, we don't. But I'm starting to understand it more. The artifact isn't just a weapon, it's a link. To link to something much older, something more powerful. My people never fully understood it, but I believe we can unlock its secrets. We just need time. Jack crossed his arms, looking out the window at the mountains in the distance. And if we can't unlock its secrets in time, what happens then? Lyra turned to face him, her expression hardening. Then we fight without it. But we won't give up. We can't afford to. For the first time, Jack saw the full weight of Lyra's resolve. She wasn't just fighting for herself, for her people, or even for the galaxy. She was fighting for a future where the artifact wasn't used to destroy, but to protect. It was a future she believed in, even if it seemed impossible. We'll figure it out, Jack said, his voice steady. We've made it this far, and we're not stopping now. Lyra smiled, though it was brief. Thank you, Jack. I don't know if I could do this alone. They worked through the night, with Lyra analyzing the artifact and Jack keeping watch. They knew that Zarek's forces were closing in, but they couldn't afford to rush. The artifact was their key to victory, and they had to understand it fully. As dawn broke, Jack looked out the window again. The mountains were still, the sun rising slowly over the horizon. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. The battle wasn't over. They were on the edge of something much bigger, something that could change the course of the galaxy. Lyra walked over to him, her expression calm but determined. "Oh, we're ready," she said softly. "It's time." Jack nodded. He had made his choice. They would fight together, using the artifact's power, not to conquer, but to protect. They would stop Zarek, or die trying. The journey ahead would be dangerous, but they had each other. That, Jack realized, was all they needed. This part moves the story forward, showing Jack and Lyra's resolve and determination to fight for the galaxy's future. It also sets up the next stage in their battle against Zarek. Would you like to continue with the next part?